With Alexis Hill, candidate for governor here in the Democratic primary, Washoe County Commissioner. I was looking at your website, and it says one of the reasons you decided to run for the governor's office is because you're a fed up mom.
Yes, I want to see Nevadans invested in and running Washoe County, the second largest county in our state. I'm seeing the real issues on the ground about how our state just doesn't invest in everyday Nevadans. We make it hard for people to get by. We tax everyday Nevadans more than we tax billionaires and corporations, and we deserve better health care, better jobs. We deserve a governor who really wants to stand up for the working person, and that's what I'm running on.
So, yeah, when I was looking at your website and a lot of the materials that you have out there right now, a lot of what you are putting out there is focusing around taxes. So let's talk about what your proposals are for taxes. I know you have some out there that are on your website people can take a look at, but let's chat about those.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very frustrated because every time the legislature comes into session and they need to raise more money to pay for essential services, they tax you and me. We have the highest gas tax, the highest sales tax, the highest vehicle registration tax. It's hard for Nevadans to get by because we don't have sufficient childcare in our state. We don't have health care that works for Nevadans. Our schools are ranked 48th in per pupil funding, and we really need a government that invests in us. And what we tend to do is we allow billionaires and corporations to take advantage of everyday Nevadans. And that is why I'm running, because we need a governor who is actually going to stand up to these special interests and ask them to pay their fair share. And Nevadans are really excited about this campaign because they want to change. And that's what I'm bringing to this state.
One of the things I noticed you talked about billionaires and local Nevadans, but you talk about like Amazon and things like that and the taxes on the roads. Explain what you mean by that. Is that because they're using special vehicles and they're out there and they don't pay the same tax that you and I do for our car?
Right. You may see the Amazon vehicles
Yeah.
in your neighborhood, and you may think, oh my gosh, Jeff Bezos loves the environment because they're EVs. No, it's because we do not tax corporate EVs in our state. So that's a giant loophole that Amazon takes advantage of. On top of that, we give Amazon huge tax incentives to come to our state, and their employees don't even make enough money to afford healthcare. So they're one of the top 10 Medicaid recipients in our state. That is unacceptable. We're subsidizing them on the front end and on the back end. And their employees deserve better, which is why I want to see our major corporations who we give tax incentives to, that they pay people a living wage.
I noticed, yeah, you say on your website, tax reform, update and modernize the tax system to make it fairer for families. Around Nevada, there's a few states in the country, right, that don't have income tax. So anytime you start talking about taxes, people worry, oh, do they want an income tax? Is an income tax something you would support or?
Well, I love that you bring that up because I want to make it clear. I'm not looking to tax working Nevadans. We already have the highest tax burden. I do not want to enact an income tax. There are enough billionaires and corporations who are not paying their fair share. We can look at clawing back some of these corporate incentives that we have been doing since 2015. Actually, my opponent in the Democratic primary has been a big proponent of these tax incentives when they're not really paying for Nevadans. We give data centers 75% tax abatement for just simply stepping into the state. For over a decade to 20 years, over $550 million has not gone to local governments to pay for essential services like public safety and our roads. We need to expect better. And I really want to watch Nevada and make sure that we're doing the right thing for everyday Nevadans.
One of the things that comes up when I talk to candidates for all different offices and both sides of the aisle is the corporate ownership of housing
Yes.
here in the state. And I noticed on your website you also talked about freezing rent raises. What do you mean by that?
So I think that we need to go hand in hand when we look at how many people are actually renting from corporate landlords. And I get emails from Nevadans every day that are experiencing this, and how their rent continues to go up and how difficult it is to just get by. Then they'll go down the street to try to get another rental for a lower price. Well, it's the same corporate entity. So people feel like they're in this terrible trap. So I want to do an executive order to call what we are in a housing crisis, and I think most Nevadans would agree with that, and cap rents temporarily while we work with the legislature to make sure that people can afford their rent, that we can keep them stably housed, but that landlords also have enough money to invest in their properties. There's a balance we can find with the proper legislation, but corporate ownership of homes, how this has happened in our state is unacceptable, and it's because of all these loopholes. Corporate ownership of homes, they get the same depreciating property tax that you and I get. They also don't pay investment tax to the state of Nevada. And so we need to properly tax these folks. And I'm the only candidate that's actually talking about that. Looking at doing a cap on the ownership of homes is certainly one of the ideas, but hey, if we're all about property rights in this state, if you want to own property but you don't live in this state, you need to pay a higher tax rate than everyday Nevadans, and we need to disincentivize this investment that it seems to make so many people so much money, but everyday Nevadans.
I know you say on your website, that's where I did my research,
Thank
but you
you.
talk about you'll fight President Trump. Now, this is one issue where you might agree on because the president has come out and said that he does not want corporations owning homes. I guess my broader question on that is, as governor of the state of Nevada, do you think you could work with the Trump administration?
Let me tell you, I'm from a purple county, and Nevada is a purple state. I work with Republican coworkers. I work with Republicans in my county and throughout this state. And there are many things that we align on. And we need to remember there's a huge group of Nevadans that are totally disenfranchised, which are nonpartisans in this state. And I want to make sure that we open up our primaries to nonpartisans so they can actually participate as well. And they have a voice in our state. But I think it's all about working with whoever wants to get things done for our state. I am totally open to working with the other side and obviously working with President Trump, but we have got to stand up to this president too. He is crippling our economy with these immigration policies that our current governor seems to be okay with enforcing. I want to get rid of the terrible laws that we have been inflicting on our immigrant communities that's kept our visitation so low. And we have the highest unemployment in the United States. We need a governor who's going to fight for really good jobs and make sure that people want to come to Nevada and realize that Nevada is open for business.
I realize some of it's a local decision, but as governor, would you want the law enforcement agencies around the state to work with ICE, for example?
Well, I would want to get rid of that 287G agreement. I don't think that it's doing us any favors. We're using taxpayer dollars to really arrest non-criminal immigrants who are working so hard to be in this state and making a lot of fear in this state, even with people who already have the paperwork to be in the United States. It is unfair what we're doing to our immigrant communities. And in Nevada, we're seeing it hit our economy, not just our families. It's unacceptable.
We'll get back to the fed up mom part. I think you recently became a foster parent.
Yes.
Correct? And I know one of your issues is universal child care. How do we go about that? So many parents will talk about how expensive it is to have a child just in general, but specifically when you talk about child care, it can cost more than one person's salary, so somebody ends up staying home a lot of times.
Absolutely. We're keeping moms out of the job market, and we've been seeing that since COVID. So many child care facilities shut down in our state, and it's because it's really tough to operate those facilities. The state doesn't support, and we don't get people ready to really work in early child care development. I think that there's opportunities for the state to support at least children from ages 3 to 4 to prepare them for kindergarten. And then I want to see long-term universal child care invested in the state. We see that Nevadans are spending more than 10% of their incomes on child care. It's costing more than college tuition for some families. So we need to see how the state can support this so we can get Nevadans back to work and get kids ready for school. This is all about investing in our future. Our kids are our future, and we do a terrible job of investing in our kids and our seniors in our state. And it's time that we elect people who really care about working Nevadans and making sure that they're successful. That's why I'm running.
You have plans for economic development, automation, and AI and data centers on your website. How does Nevada diversify the economy here? Obviously, we learned in COVID with so much of it reliant on the Strip or that type of business that we needed to diversify a bit.
Yes, and we still do. And I think that we're looking for a silver bullet, and there is no silver bullet. What we've seen when government comes in and supports everyday workers and making sure they're successful. So when the government comes in and supports public transportation, supports childcare, supports early childhood education, supports senior services, working families, that we actually see that we create economic growth from that. So when we support in ensuring that we have enough money to fix our roads, guess what? That's private contractors who get those contracts, who get to fix our roads. If we have enough money that we can fix our schools and invest in our schools, well, that is good paying union jobs that can come in and just continually have these great opportunities to rehab our government facilities. In between that, it's investing in the workforce. Our workforce needs to be ready for the jobs of the future. They are not. So we need to make sure that we are investing in our kids, but also holding our school districts accountable and making sure that they are serving all of our kids. I hear from so many parents with special needs kids who really need more resources in the classroom. We also need to pay our teacher aides who are essential to ensuring that these kids get the attention that they want, that they are paid a living wage. CCSD is also one of the top Medicaid recipients in the state, and it's because our support staff are not paid a living wage.
You talk a lot about economics, affordability, and you say your most important role is chief revenue officer. So people that don't know you, what in your past life and what's brought you to this moment that you see yourself as being the chief revenue officer, why you focus so much on that?
Well, I have been working in local government my whole life. I actually, as a child, was inspired to work in local government because I wanted to fix the sidewalk on my walk to school. So it's actually been a passion of mine to invest in my community. I went away for college, came back to my hometown, worked as a planner. I worked at the city of Reno also in economic development. And I see where the cracks are in the foundation, and it just takes additional resources that are well managed and that there's a certain amount of accountability to make sure that these resources are spent well. But we have to invest in Nevadans, and we just do not do that. We do not have a social safety net in this state, and because of that, we pay for the downstream effects. We have a homeless issue that is out of control. We have folks who are in our jails, families that are being torn apart, so we have to really lean on our communities to support our foster care system. If we pull people out of poverty, we are going to see real results and economic development in this state. And that is what I'm all about, and making sure that our working families have opportunities and that this is the state that we all came to. My parents came here for economic opportunity. My grandparents, my grandpa was a driller in Ely, and he came here because he could actually afford a house. My grandma worked at the laundromat. That is what Nevada is all about, and that is what I'm fighting for every day.